Rivendare Blood Death Knight absolutely has invulnerability in any matchup, specifically because of the Baron Rivendare card itself. Before we go any farther, I want to hop into the deck and take a look at just a couple of cards that we've included in here. And what you're going to see here is that this looks a lot like any other Blood Death Knight deck that you've taken a look at. Just a couple of key differences here that I want to call out. Keeping in mind that our primary win condition is the Baron Rivendare here. I like including a Sir Finley in this. A lot of times when we shuffle in those 3 additional horsemen, they can be a little bit hard to find. And typically what you're going to see with this specific version of the deck is that by turn 10, you're only probably going to have about 10 cards left in your deck. And a lot of times you'll have quite a few cards in hand. You can play the Finley and you'll be able to find the last of the 4 horsemen that's on the bottom to be able to play it and then be able to kill your opponent. So I like having the Finley. It's just nice to be able to look at that bottom stack of cards on your deck to be able to find those additional horsemen to be able to close out the game. Also want to point out here, running 2 copies of Construct Quarter. I really think there's a good argument to only run 1 of these. The reason why I like 2 is because you're going to find some matchups where we actually just want to kill our Rivendare as well as the other 3 horsemen as soon as we play them on the board. And the Construct Quarters actually just give us an extra way to do that. So for example, if you were against a deck that you knew ran Silence, or maybe you're against a Jackpot Rogue and you're worried about a Mass Polymorph, we need to make sure that this card dies to be able to shuffle the other horsemen into our deck. It is our primary win condition. And so to do that, we can actually just play the Rivendare on the board and then kill it ourselves with the Construct Quarter. Also keeping in mind the Construct Quarter can be used to remove any of the other horsemen once we put those on the board. And so sometimes you'll be able to play your final horseman and then you'll be able to kill it with a Construct Quarter and just win the game. Sometimes that's going to actually help you to win versus giving your opponent an additional turn where they may find a way to actually be able to kill you. So I do like 2 copies here. It's a little bit slow, but I like it. And along that line, also you're going to see here 2 copies of Obliterate. I prefer this over Asphyxiate because this allows us to target a specific minion, again, just so that we can kill our own Rivendare if we need to, or those other 3 horsemen, kind of along the same lines as the Construct Quarter. Important to keep in mind, I think every Blood Death Knight runs Death Strikes, but on 10 mana, you would potentially be able to play one of the horsemen and then kill it with a Death Strike as well. So multiple ways that we can kill our own horsemen when we need to is going to be really key to the deck. And just making sure that we think things through about how we're going to be able to win the game and how our opponent can stop us. One other thing to keep in mind with the Baron Rivendare, if you suspect your opponent is playing a deck where they may run Theatar, you're not going to want to hold on to these 6 mana, 6/6, 4 horseman minions. You're going to want to get those on the board, get them killed, and just move along with the progression of getting through the 4 horsemen so that you can finish off your opponent. One other note here, I do like 1 Famished Fool. I think 2 is a little bit too much, but sometimes you can just need the extra card draw to be able to get through your deck. Then if you look at the rest of it, you're going to realize it's pretty much a standard Blood Death Knight deck as we go from there. Now we're going to take it out and see if we can actually win with this version of Blood Death Knight. Looks like we've hit a priest here. I'm going to make a reasonable assumption that this is going to be an undead priest. Mulligan for the deck is going to look a lot different based on what your opponent is. Against something like aggro, I don't actually mind keeping the Blood Boil because we're going to need the healing / minion removal. Outside of that, again, it's just matchup specific. As far as the cards that you're going to want to look for, I would just encourage you to think through what your opponent is going to be doing and then find the cards that's going to help us to be able to react to that. We see here our opponent is going to be Undead Priest, so we know they're going to be playing a lot of minions on the board, and they're going to have the potential to, bring those minions back. For example, with the High Cultist Basilisk, Animate Dead. So we're going to want to, again, just make sure that we're using our resources wisely, as you would with any control deck. As well as keep in mind that our opponent could potentially have a lot of burst if a Void Touched Attendant comes down. So we see here Undying Allies along with a Haunting Nightmare. This is a really, really, really strong start for our opponent. That was their turn too as they were on the coin. So we're going to make sure that we don't overreact to this. I'm just going to play the Venomous Scorpion. And the question is either Howling Blast or Plague Strike. No weapons in the deck. We definitely don't want this. Plague Strike can potentially allow us to remove the Haunting Nightmare as well as the follow-up card. Howling Blast, again, would potentially allow us to remove a 3-mana minion, which we know the Undead Priest has a lot of, but I think it's pretty obvious here that Plague Strike is going to be better. It's 1 mana cheaper, it still deals 3 damage, and then we get the 2/2 with Rush. And we actually see here that our opponent has a very, very strong start. We now have the Incorporeal Corporal coming down. So the other thing that we have to keep in mind here is how much do we want to play around High Cultist Basilisk. They have no kept cards, only 3 cards in hand. If they have it on turn 4, we're going to be in trouble if they get these back, especially if these Death Rattles land on the Cultist. But I think what we want to do is just Plague Strike, rush into this, and then we can use our Obliterates to be able to remove the Corporal. We just want to make sure that we're not going to be taking all that damage. So I'm going to make this play. We're going to hope that these Death Rattles land on 2 separate cards. You can see we landed one here, and we landed the other one over here. And then I'm just going to obliterate the 5/5 again. If that's getting to attack every single turn, the damage is going to add up very quickly. And then at this point, we're looking pretty much at like 5, 6, 7. Unfortunately, our opponent does have the Cultist. And pretty much we just have to Blood Boil here. We're going to take a lot of damage. But at least we've been able to get back up to 30. These are all infected now, and likely they're going to be adding to the board. And you can see here that, again, our opponent just with a very, very good draw. And then just kind of wondering how many additional 4/3s we're going to have to deal with here as well. Keep it in mind that we can play the Gnome Muncher for some additional healing. But it's also going to hit a card that's going to die anyway and heal us, which is a little bit bad. So we can actually just take a look in our deck for something else. Gain 10 health, we would gain 14. Which seems pretty strong. I think that's what we want to do. So you can see here, we're not really going to be relying on the Rivendare win condition. We will if we have to, but at this point, we're really just trying to stay alive. So this dies. This goes to 1. We're going to heal for 4. That's 18. This actually puts us to 28. So I'm going to do that. And then you can see here, we hit a Construct Quarter. So is there any value to doing anything else really this particular turn? I think we really just want to get down the Chillfallen Baron and draw an additional card. Don't really want to rotate the hand. We do have access to healing and removal, but it would be nice to get a little bit farther in our deck. Maybe if we could find a Soul Stealer, that might be enough to help us be able to win the game here. So we're going to play out the Baron, actually hit a second Baron. This is going to give us an additional card draw. You can see we're at 28. Likely they're going to make this trade. If they don't, we're going to heal almost all of the damage that it's going to do punching face anyway. And our opponent just continues to expand their board. So what we're really worried about now is a Void Touch Attendant coming down and creating a lot of additional damage for our opponent. And unfortunately, there's just nothing that we can really do about that. And the damage really adding up. So this guy is going to die anyway. And heal us for 2. We go to 13. And I think we just want to get down the Chillfall Baron again. Again, we want to draw another card. And then we're just going to Death Strike one of these 4/3s. It's going to heal us, take damage off the board, make us a little less vulnerable to something like a Void Touched Attendant. And again, just trying to draw farther into our deck, looking for something like a Soul Stealer. And unfortunately, we have missed yet again on that. And then this puts us back up to 19. So assuming this dies, we'll either be able to trade with it or our opponent kills it. Then we would be able to hero power, and we'll be able to heal for an additional 10 with Vampiric Blood because we'll have the 3 corpses that we need. So again, really just trying to survive the onslaught from our opponent's deck. And we do see the Void Touched Attendant come down, so the damage is really adding up here. Soul Stealer off the top would be great. And even then, we would actually still be in a little bit of trouble. Just because of the amount of damage that our opponent has on the board. We hit an Astalor here. Things really not looking good. Getting down the Gnome Muncher. So we can actually just Astalor on the Void Touched Attendant. We can't remove any of these minions with just the Astalor anyway. Play the Gnome Muncher. Gnome Muncher hits this and heals us to 11. And then just hope that our opponent doesn't have direct damage spells, that they have to fight their way through this the hard way. I think is going to be the best play that we can actually make this turn. And then we're going to pass it back. But you can see here we're really on the ropes against this. Our opponent had a lightning fast start, and then we've missed on our Soul Stealers so far. Both Soul Stealers at bottom 14. Next turn, if it looks like it's a life or death situation and we have to have a Soul Stealer, we'll be able to play the Sir Finley. You can actually see here that Najak Hexen is actually going to kill us. So I believe that means we've lost this game. This should be lethal for our opponent. And you can see our opponent unfortunately didn't realize that they had lethal and, you know, continued to just play a bunch of extra cards. So unfortunate for them. They didn't really add up the damage they had on the board, but you can see here, unfortunately, taking a loss. Next up, we find ourselves up against a Rogue. And against Rogue, Construct Quarter is too slow to keep. What I've been seeing at my rank is more Jackpot Rogue than Miracle Rogue. But I think I'm going to look for something a little bit more early game to do. Although the deck doesn't have a lot of early game anyway. Maybe School Teacher is actually just going to be a keep here. Getting the 4/4 down on 4. The DK Discover Pool is the best in the game. So we're going to go with this. And then we'll very quickly be figuring out what it is that we're going to be up against. Patchwork could be an interesting pickup depending on what deck our opponent's actually playing. And you can see here just a hero power. Not much early game in this deck. You can see I don't really like running Body Baggers and Foul Eggs. I feel like they're just not as good as they used to be. And I'm just going to go ahead and get down the Chill Fall and Baron. So next turn, we'll potentially have a choice between Vizier being active or a School Teacher. But this could actually be Miracle Rogue the way things are shaping up here. Last game against the Priest, very unfortunate. If they wouldn't have had Basilisk in hand on turn 4... I feel like we probably just win that game. It just they really had a strong draw, so unfortunate there. The game even still felt winnable with what they had at certain times. So we do have the option here now. We're definitely going to take this trade, so we're going to see what we draw first, and we realize that we are against a Miracle Rogue. We hit the Gnome Muncher. And the question is, are we going to float a mana with the Vizier? And I kind of think we do. We float 1 mana now, but it won't be active next turn. And then next turn, on turn 5, maybe we have like a School Teacher play that we would want to make. So I'm going for the Vizier, and I think we're really just looking for removal for a potential big minion that could be coming off of the location. So pretty straightforward. I think we take the Obliterate here, pass it back to our opponent. So we do have the 0 mana Obliterate. Whenever they make the big minion coming off of this, we're going to be able to remove it for free. That's going to allow us to do other stuff as well, which is going to be really good. I think what we're really worried about in this matchup is going to be the Necrolord Draka. If they get a really big weapon, we're not running weapon destruction in the deck. I was actually not expecting to see Miracle Rogues at all. If you were expecting to see Miracle Rogues, then we would probably want to slot in maybe a Rust Rot Viper. But again, if they're not a significant portion of what we're facing on the ladder, then running that one tech card that may still not guarantee you the win in that matchup is just going to be bad overall. I would assume this means that our opponent is going in this turn. And fortunately for us, they only got draw 2 and not draw 4. But we should be seeing a pretty wide board and a big minion. Likely we're still just going to be playing the School Teacher. We'll play the Noggling with the best spell that we can discover off of the Noggling. And then we're going to be removing their big minion with Obliterate. And then we're just going to have to proceed from the game from there. And unfortunately, they actually have both locations in the top, roughly the top 10. I believe that card came from over here. So unfortunately, an 8/8 and a 9/9. And actually with the second Obliterate, I think we want to change our plan here. We can actually just remove their entire board. So you can see it was really important to take the first Obliterate. We are going to take 6, but we remove our opponent's board entirely. Unfortunately, I actually thought this was Astalor. I must be going crazy.
Clever, aren't you?
I thought we had an Astalor to be able to remove this. But we're still going to discover a Blood Rune card. Maybe we could find like a Heart Strike. And you can see here, we already have 1 Vampiric Blood, and we're not going to have the corpses to really use it. Second Gnome Muncher, second Death Strike. We're going to take the Gnome Muncher. There's going to be a lot of cases where our opponent is going to have to fight through this the hard way. So next turn, we're probably looking at a Gnome Muncher, and then we're going to need to be prepared for an additional 2 big minions that are going to be coming out of these locations. So again, just unfortunate that they had both locations at the same time. And again, we're hoping to be able to avoid a really big Draka turn too early here. Likely they're not going to be doing a whole lot this turn because they're going to want to save resources for the big minions on the locations. If they spend too much now, it's actually going to be good for us. And actually just hoping that our opponent takes a trade here. That would be best for us. You can see they don't. Good play by our opponent. They're going to let us make the trade. So we're going to trade into the higher attack minion. And then I just want to get down the Gnome Muncher. So it's possible that the Gnome Muncher, they're able to kill it. They have lots of ways to be able to deal 3 damage. Potentially they could have something off of the concoction to be able to remove this. So likely we don't get an additional heal out of this. We see the Bone Spike, unfortunately, going to be coming down. And now they're just looking to play as many cards as possible to get these big minions back. We are going to have Patchwork. Potentially we're going to be able to remove one of these big minions and hopefully destroy a Necrolord Draka or an Edwin from our opponent's hand. And the minions actually aren't super big here. So we're going to have a 50-50 with the Patchwork to remove one of these guys and potentially hit some good stuff. Followed up with a Soul Stealer turn. So again, Necrolord Draka, I think, is how we're going to be winning this, especially with both locations gone. So we take the 50-50. Other option would be like a Vampiric Blood to heal up to 29, and then potentially discover something to remove a 5-5 here. Is that actually better than the 50-50 with Patchwork? Is the question. If we take 12, we go to 7.
Clever, aren't you?
We take 12, we would still be at 17 with a Soul Stealer next turn. I think we're actually going to be better off making this play and holding the Patchwork here. See, we hit an Obliterate. But I'm going to School Teacher and try to find something to remove something here. And unfortunately, we missed on that just a little bit. Now next turn we'll be able to Soul Stealer, so again, we're really just afraid of the Necrolord Draka weapon. The more cards our opponent plays, the less damage they're going to be able to get out of that Draka weapon.
I know all the steps.
And if they play a big Edwin, we're going to have removal for it as well. So we're going to remove their board with Soul Stealer. We'll have this to be able to remove Edwin. So again, it's just going to come down to how big of a Draka weapon they can make and whether or not it's actually going to be able to kill us. They're going to drown our 4/4. And so again, you can see here, you know, this is a Rivendare deck, but we're playing against decks that are actually able to deal quite a bit of damage to us here. And that Draka weapon may actually just not be big enough. So we're going to clear our opponent's board past turn, and then next turn we're going to be able to Gnome Muncher, which could be enough to actually just close out the game here. So again, you can see it is a Rivendare deck. That's going to be a win condition really against slower decks. So against like these faster and better decks, or not necessarily better, but just decks that play differently like aggro decks, Baron Rivendare is not our win condition. Our win condition is really just outlast their stuff. And I do believe our opponent's going to be out of win conditions now. We still have a decent amount of healing. We'll find out if they're running something like a Wicked Stab here. That could potentially be the School Teacher that they put on the bottom. Really just looking for a Death Strike target. We're going to go down to 5. If they play a minion, we'll be able to Death Strike it and heal up. We would want to do that versus something like a Patchwork. And we actually see the Astalor, so the Astalor is potentially bad news for us here. We certainly don't want them to be able to Shadow Step the Astalor. So we need to make sure we remove it. 5 mana version potentially coming down next turn. So we're not totally out of the woods yet, but we can steal that Astalor, which is probably the correct play here. We remove this Astalor and steal the one from our opponent's hand. Astalor feels certainly like a way that we could potentially lose this game. So the other way that we lose this game is going to be if they're able to Shadow Step this. They do still have 1 Shadow Step left, so I think, unfortunately, we're just going to have to give our opponent 1 Concoction, and we're just going to hope that it's not the 3 damage. Outside of that, we should be okay. We've got healing for next turn in the form of 5 armor, as well as 10 health here. We know that we can remove the Edwin, so things looking pretty good. You can see here again, Baron Rivendare just not really coming into play in this specific matchup.
That's right. Feel the groove.
So we'll obliterate this and take 3. And really their last win condition is to make this as big as possible, so good play from our opponents here. And again, just hoping that they're not creating random damage off of the Putricide. So we can even just like Death Strike the Putricide first, and then obliterate here and Vampiric Blood. It's going to give us the most possible amount of healing. And again, we know that they're just looking for damage.
I know all.
They actually Shadow Step the Putricide, which is interesting.
No more cards.
Now they're going to be going into Fatigue here. Heal 3. And Putricide coming back down. So I think we're definitely going to go for Vampiric Blood and Death Strike. Again, likely Death Strike this first. Because we're going to want to obliterate. So that's going to be 8 mana that we're going to be spending this turn.
Clever, aren't you?
See what we find. Potentially a Soul Stealer would change our play. Again, I want to kill this first because I want to shut down the random concoctions, and then I can just go ahead and discover something with the Hematurge here. We'll take the Blood Boil. That's going to be additional healing, and then we obliterate. We're at 18. Our opponent is in Fatigue. They only have 3 cards left. We do know they have the 4/4 Naga, as we see coming out. I don't think there's going to be anything they can discover, although something like a Wicked Stab is going to be potentially a lot of damage here. A Jackpot is a way that they could potentially win the game, so our opponent actually trying very hard to be able to win the game and really making some good plays when you think about it. Next turn, you know, potentially it's just Blood Boil and Astalor. That's going to be the most amount of healing that we can do. That's exactly what we're looking for. So I will likely bump into this guy. The Finley does nothing. Oh, the Finley does do something. I've actually never seen that interaction. But I do think the play here still is we're going to bump this because we want it to die to the Blood Boil. We're going to get down the Blood Boil and the Astalor, and then we're going to pass it back. So our opponent's able to fight off some fatigue damage with the Finley. You can see here we have a lot of healing. We'll get more healing off of these, assuming they don't trade. We're at 26, so looks like we're going to be winning this game. Again, not because of Baron Rivendare. This just was not a Rivendare game, but because we've been able to outlast our opponent. And the Bloodlust here is still not going to be enough. We'll be healing an additional 4 off of these guys, and I think we actually just kill our opponent
That's all for now.
with Astalor here. And you can see we win the game. Rivendare Blood DK. Rivendare is inevitable in matchups that you get the chance to play it. Outside of that, exactly the same Blood DK deck that you may already be playing. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Uncorrupt. Good luck out on the ladder.